Okay, three, two, one. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 181. We're going to title this Reboot Your Router. But before we do that, we have to update our privacy policy. We don't know who you are. We don't care who you are. As long as you watch and ask to join our WhatsApp group, to which we don't know who you are and don't care who you are. I don't know. Tom, is that right? Did I do that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. We have no idea who you are. We don't track you while you listen. We don't track you as you download, I think.
I think we have whatever iTunes does, and we have some ads on our in30.net site that are Google ads.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
If you listen or don't, we don't really care. Not to say that we don't value you listening, because we do value our audience members and the people in our awesome WhatsApp group. But we just don't care to track you or get into your business.
I mean, it's a free podcast, so unless you want to start giving us money,
yeah.
I mean, give us money, then we can tell you a little more, but not really much more, because we really don't care.
We know at least 2 people download each episode.
Yeah. So this is brought to you by #GDPR for all your privacy regulations.
Is your inbox a little too Spartan? Do you miss the flood of emails you used to get back in the day? Well, thanks to GDPR, you can now relive the glory days of coming home to an inbox full of 1,000 plus emails. Sign up for GDPR today, or literally anything. We'll find you.
And what I love is that you got stuff from things that no longer you thought existed before. You use the service once. And the problem is, if you delete those without reading them, what you're saying is you don't care about their privacy. So you better read all those privacy policies again.
So I used way back in the day, this is going to be like over 5 years ago, I used a time tracking app at work to see how long I was spending on various projects, just because I was curious. And it was a stupid Android app. I'd sign in with Google and I'd track time. And I used it for like a week before deciding, wow, this is totally a pain. And I removed it from my phone, not even thinking. And I got a GDPR notice from them. It's like, okay, that's weird. I get it.
Look, if you don't know what we're talking about, GDPR, which I thought everyone did because I have lots of friends in the EU and they're going crazy for this. It's a privacy regulation that the EU says all EU citizens, now you have to limit the data that you store about them, and you have to let them take it out, and you have to be able to delete anything that they put in. So a lot of companies are, in fact, they have to update all these things. It's like basically their core infrastructure. Like, it's a really big deal. And there are significant fines if you don't do it right. So EU is worried about this. Now, the US companies, what do you do? So news sites, I think the LA Times is famous for this, last week said, our EU base is so small, we're just going to block them. If your IP emanates from or originates in the EU, you know what? You can't go to our site, because it's cheaper to block you than to do GDPR compliance.
Yeah, which is really worrisome. I mean, yeah, I get that you've got to go through some compliance talks. You've got to do a little bit of data auditing. You've got to figure out what's going where you can track it, and how you can surface it. But are you just willy-nilly collecting data that you have no idea what it does, who it goes to, where it goes to, and what you can do with it? Like, at the very least, it seems wasteful, not to mention, irresponsible with other people's data. Why collect it if you have no idea what you're going to do with it? I just hope I used to do that, right? I used to download everything and never delete a thing because I was a data hoarder. And eventually I got over myself, knowing that the internet and life itself is a transient existence. You got to live in the moment of the internet. Let it wash over you like a wave of tweets and vanish into the ether.
Look, the DEF CON last year, I know we did, the Crypto Village had at least one GDPR talk. I know 2 or 3 are probably going to be, I have no idea yet, but are probably going to be slated for this year. But if you're an EU citizen, this obviously affects you. If you're a US citizen, you're going to get the benefit of the large companies not hoarding your data as much as they were. And already, I think an $8 billion lawsuit against Facebook and Twitter have come out, which is going to be thrown out because I'm sure they're in compliance, but we'll see.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and it's definitely a case of rising tide raising all boats. Thanks to the EU, we're getting a bunch of really substantial privacy regulation, and the Americans are going to see the benefit of that because unlike the LA Times, Google can't just say, "Yeah, we're just going to shut off Europe." Yeah, sorry, no more searches or Gmail. You just no, shut it off. Throw a big switch, null route them.
So again, we don't track you. Uh, we only care if you're in our WhatsApp group. So you want to get in our WhatsApp group, please message us, tweet us, do whatever you can to get a hold of one of us, and we will throw you in there. And I mean, we don't track who's in there either. So
Unless you're spamming, then we throw you out. But if you're in our WhatsApp group, you can get a very occasional code samples from myself, which is just utter trash, but it's enjoyable to watch a monkey try to program.
written on your phone while on the train. Written in Vim on your phone.
Yep.
So
the only way to program.
So our first story today is if you have a router, stop what you're doing, pause the show. I mean, we're going to continue, but you can download this later. We will wait. Restart your router. And I mean, there's more than that, but basically the FBI is telling you Russian botnet is taking over a whole bunch of routers. It's not worth to know which ones it is. The best thing you can do is just restart your router, flush the cache, and probably do this every week in perpetuity until somebody fixes it.
Yeah, this is nice. So it's probably time to reboot your router anyway, right? They get a little old, they get a little crufty in the cache, right? That's totally technical terms there, but it's probably time to reboot the router. So unplug it, wait a couple seconds, plug it back in, you're good. I know for my old Linksys systems, I do this on a weekly basis because the Wi-Fi network would just die. It would just vanish. But that was a super old Linksys that was doing horrible things to with custom firmware. Pay attention to your router status page. If you've got a nice new fancy router that goes out and looks for its own updates, click the update button if it pops up. If you don't know or you don't see a page like that, do a search for your router, like the numbers on the front, like, hey, WRT54G, which, by the way, is ancient. You don't have one of those. I can almost guarantee it. But search, Linksys, WRT54G firmware update. There's probably something out there for you. If not now, then there will be in a couple weeks just to close this vulnerability that this botnet is using. But, until then, unplug it, plug it back in.
Basically, it's saying that there's 3 stages, but stage 2 and 3, so they infect your router. Rebooting it is not going to get rid of the infection. It just prevents it from spreading, and then they won't be able to hijack it. And hopefully, in the meantime, before it gets reinfected, the FBI is hopefully going to figure out how to stop this, or you're going to get a firmware update or any one of those things. But rebooting the router will stop the problem the second, but you're going to still have to look for the update. The problem is that these companies generally don't like to update these products. They just much rather you buy a new one. So you're hoping that the FBI stops the malware authors before they take over your machine again.
Yeah, and I imagine that these companies, now that the FBI is actually involved, will say, I know this router is ancient and we don't usually do this, but we're going to go ahead and push an update. We're going to fix this vulnerability right now because, literally the cops are getting involved.
A little more than the cops, but yes. Yeah. The other issue is if your router is old, I mean, and I don't want to define what old is, but let's say 5 years or so, well, before you updated it, or you got it from your cable company or your or whatever other company, maybe it's time to get a new one. Every 5 years or so, that's probably the good lifespan of a router. And you may say, but it's working fine. But yeah, you probably got a new phone in that time that has, if you're on G, remember there's N, now there's AC. If you're on N, there's AC and now AD. It may not really affect you that much, but the newer routers have better features. And one of them is probably auto updating firmware, which keeps you safe. Probably better range, higher frequency on the antennas, all these other stuff, better guest modes. So if you haven't updated, pay some money, buy yourself a fancy new router. The mesh routers any one of them are pretty good. If you want to roll your own, the Ubiquiti access points are awesome. I like the $45 router. It has no access point to it. And then you buy the Wi-Fi access point for $100. So $150 gets you a really awesome quasi do-it-yourself kit that's fairly easy to manage and makes you look really cool.
If you want a do-it-yourself enterprisey home lab sort of situation, I totally recommend pfSense. Either build yourself, it can run on like any PC with a couple NIC cards in it, or a couple NIC ports. So, grab an old PC, make sure it's got 2 Ethernet ports, install pfSense on it, build the router of your dreams. It can do anything. It's based on FreeBSD. You can make it dance or fly to the moon if you wanted to. You just have to add some fireworks. And grab Ubiquiti access points. I'm going to second the recommendation on those because they're just stellar. They're incredibly stable. I've had to reboot mine once since I've had it in the past like 3 or 4 years. Actually, physically unplug it and plug it back in because something went wrong. Super stable, great range, really fast. They stay relatively cool. I love it.
Look, that's what we did. I had some computer shuttle PC for ridiculously cheap. I think I asked you, is 2 gigs of RAM enough? And you said, start there and see what it is. Absolutely is enough. And $150, I bought another NIC card. So it ended up being like a little under 200, which is about the cost of one of those really fancy routers. I paid another $100 for the Ubiquiti access point, ran the wire through the first floor, put it on the ceiling, hit it through and wired up into the ceiling, and it's a conversation starter, but I have so much control. And we said it's been rock solid. The only thing that's stopping it is obviously when the power goes out.
Yeah, it generally tends to kill most electronics if your power does go out, unless you've got a really cool battery backup system, which I do have. Not for the access point, but for the pfSense system. So if the power goes out, all of my networking gear stays running. I can have no electricity, but I will still be connected to the internet until my laptop dies.
So again, if you have an old router, upgrade. If for right now, just reboot your router, call your parents, also tell them, don't even tell them what you're doing. Just tell them, we need you to go to the router and unplug it and plug it back in. Why? Just don't explain it. Just do it. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Make sure that they just unplug it and wait 10 seconds, plug it back in, and do that. Try and do it. Find all the people. Tell everyone. Let's stop this botnet before it. I guess the joke is meddle in our election again, or just meddle in the election. The midterms haven't happened yet, so I can say that. So
yeah, we're laughing now. I don't know why we're laughing now.
Well, because they said it's the largest botnet, and I mean 500,000. And look, I have a gigabit. I mean, I have a gigabyte line. You take control of that. You have a gigabit at your disposal. So
yeah, and remember, like this botnet, sure, it can affect you, but it's really somebody hijacking your gear to point it like a gun at other services on the internet. It's not necessarily that they're gonna steal all of your banking information or whatever. It's that they will use your hardware and your internet that you pay for as a weapon against someone else.
And once they're in, they can install Bitcoin miners on your router. You leave it all the way on, or not in Bitcoin.
You think your Wi-Fi is slow right now? Wait till they get a mining operation going on there.
Monero or whatever in Ethereum. Anyway, next story. So we've been talking about the idea for years. If you don't have an Android, if you don't have a certified by Google Android phone, there's a chance that you're running spyware. And again, another report has found that a lot of phones, Chinese branded cheap Android phones, are running their own secret set of spyware, including ZTE, which the FBI and all the 3-letter agencies have told everyone do not buy. In the US, do not import, do not do anything. And this is why they're having malware pre-installed. It's not Google certified, so they're illegally putting on the Google apps on top of AOSP, which is the official Android source project name compared to Android O or N or whatever else.
Yeah, this unfortunately, this is one of the things you risk, and one of the things that comes with having an open source operating system is somebody can build it themselves, modify it the way they want, and ship it out to whoever they want. And that's not to say that open source is bad. I would never denigrate open source projects or operating systems. I love that Android's open source. I love that I can hack together my own ROMs because I used to, and it was fun. I just don't have the time anymore. But this is a risk that you run. I'd say, I was really tempted to go buy a ZTE phone at one point in time, or Huawei, because they were cheaper than the alternatives. But you do get what you pay for, and apparently, if you pay too low of a price, you get spyware. So stick with the bigger brands. Stick with the official. Google licensed this version of Android to run on this phone, Android phones. If you want to avoid the problem altogether and go iPhone, more power to you. But really like my Android phones.
Well, this is the problem is your two, and we've been saying this for years. Your two choices basically are iPhone, which Apple controls everything of, and you see the prices, or the Pixel line, and which is also just as expensive. And you say, but those are expensive. What about Samsung? Samsung is okay, but they're starting to separate more and more from Android for their own stuff, and they do the monthly updates and everything else. But Samsung is just as expensive. So you want to go low. What about this ZTE phone for $50? It runs Android. I give it to my kids. Well, that's what you get. You get things that are not updated, that are not certified, that are not whatever it is, and this is what happens.
Yeah, the big guys you can safely stick with, right? Like the Pixel line by Google is an obvious first choice. It is going to be more expensive. The Galaxy line by Samsung, or even one of the cheaper Samsung phones, if you can find one of their lower end, lower spec models, if that does what you want it to do, if it browses dank memes and text messages people just fine, go for it. Save yourself some dough. Don't worry about getting anything too insane. LG is fine. HTC is fine. And these are all coming from, software perspective, right? You can get into the weeds about, well, this launcher is better than this launcher, and this feature is better than this one, and this build quality by this manufacturer is better than this one. You can get into the weeds on this stuff. I'm just saying, stick to the major players if you want to avoid this spyware problem in particular.
I've always recommended the Motorola, the G line, if you need a quick phone that will last you until your next update. And I do caveat that, like, the G6 is coming out. It's probably $200, and it will last you about a year. It's not going to get the newest version. They said we do not want to update this, but it is a $200 or $220 phone, knowing that you're not going to get the updates, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a phone to take you until your whatever contract expires, or whatever else, until October for the iPhone or for the Pixels.
If you wanted to go down the road of running a ROM on one of these cheap phones, you can do it. Just remember that the burden of security is now on you. You have to make sure it gets the patches, you have to run the updates, and you have to put up with anything weird that phone does when it comes in contact with software that wasn't tailor-made for
it. So again, just be aware. We always say look for phones. Android issues monthly security updates. You can't ask the manufacturer that do you do the monthly, but start looking. Are they giving the security updates? And I'm forgetting the name of that Android project. Not Tango. The application layer that they can push updates to that are very easy, so they get the next version of Android really fast. I can't remember it now, but a lot more phones are having it. And I remember seeing Samsung was surprisingly absent. Like Nokia is starting to come back as the phone of an Android phone brand that people are starting to like. It's new. The other one was the OnePlus 6. But there was an issue with the OnePlus 6. I don't remember what it was.
I know they've done like shady marketing things
Yeah.
in the past, and it was like seen as a super cheap phone, and now it's getting more expensive for less features. I really wanted a OnePlus One back in the day, but it's just kind of fallen off of my want list. I honestly will probably get a Samsung for my next phone. I mean, I'm happy with the Pixel right now, but not getting the Pixel 2. I need my headphone jack.
That's a thing that's another thing. I'm happy with my Pixel 2 XL. My wife's happy with her Pixel 2. It's supposed to get 3 years of updates, so the camera is phenomenal. And about that's my review. You can go with the others, but again, stick to the big names. The next two stories come from Troy Hunt. And if you don't know Troy Hunt, he runs the have I been pwned website where they take all the data breaches and he puts the hashes of the passwords, and he has a little app on his site or download, and you can test if your password or your personal information has been there and what to do. So the next two stories are he basically created extensions that let you do it from your application. And I guess the first one is that 1Password is integrating with it. I don't use 1Password, but I don't think Tom does either. But 1Password is again, it's a password manager for the Mac. I don't particularly like them for political reasons, not for any other reason. So if you want to pay them, absolutely pay them. I put them high on my list. They're not my number one choice.
So I really want every password manager to interface with this API, or at least give you the option as a plugin to interface with this API. This thing is so cool. So people have been asking Troy Hunt a lot for, hash the passwords. Can I get the leaked file? Can I do my own research and analysis? And he never wants to put users at risk, but he understands the value in being able to say, this password has been owned and found in data breaches X number of times. Well, he built this thing a while ago, and apparently it flew under all of our radars. The pwned passwords API, it's 100% free. It is unauthenticated. It is not rate limited. You can throw this thing at anything. And the licensing, it's not public domain by name, but it's Creative Commons attribution without necessary attribution. He said, yeah, if you just want to use the pwned passwords API, you don't even have to acknowledge that you're using my API. It would be nice, but you don't have to. So he's intentionally waiving rights. It's basically a declaration of public domain. What this thing does is you on your site, if a new user is signing up or if they're changing their password, you take whatever they put in the password field when they submit it, and you run it through a SHA-1 hash, not to store or anything like that. You take the first 5 characters of that SHA-1 hash and you hand it over to the pwned passwords API. It gives you a list of hashes with numbers next to them. And you can say, okay, well, here's the rest of the hash. I'm going to match it myself because I just get a list. You don't hand the full hash over to Troy Hunt. You don't hand it over to the pwned passwords API. You just take the first 5 characters. So it's really, really good at being anonymous. It takes it, or you take this list, you find the remainder of your hash in that list, and then the number next to it is how many times that password has been found in a data breach. Every hash in there is at least 1. Obviously not every hash in existence, but it means that you can come back and tell your user with an error message, hey, we're not going to let you use that password because it's already being compromised. It's been in a data breach. It's in password files. It is known bad at this point. Somebody used this password somewhere else and burned it. It could be you. So pick a different password, please. Something that's not on our owned passwords list. Super, super useful, really powerful. I wrote a tiny little shell function to do this exact thing with his API. Really awesome. And free. 1Password has now integrated this so that if one of your passwords shows up against the API, or if it sees you use a password that's shown up in the pwned passwords list, it'll come back and say, whoa, buddy, hold on there. This thing got owned. You got to pick a new one.
Well, here's my like realistic problem. If one of your password requirements that it's not on the API, I don't know how that's going to be possible unless you're doing something crazy. So if the average person comes up and says correct horse battery staple 1, they're going to be a correct horse battery staple, which is the famous strong password. This has been used a million times. So you add a 1. Okay, this has been used
let's
500,000.
Correct horse battery staple 1. Checking it now. That's been breached 10 times. It's been involved in 10 different data breaches.
Again, you still need, because remember, it's the hash, but it's also the username. So, okay, it's in 10 different breaches. Okay, I guess that's bad. But at what point do you run out of usable passwords? Because of, especially if you make a requirement that it can't be in any breaches.
Right. So, and that's where he says in his blog post that site owners can make this determination. They can say, all right, it's been involved in, 1 to 5 breaches. Who cares? Whatever. It's such a low number. But if they choose something that's been in more than 20, all right, we're going to show them a warning. If they choose something that's been in more than 100, we're going to flat out deny them from using that password. So Twitter's got the list of commonly banned passwords, right? You can't use Twitter, you can't use password, you can't use monkey, you can't use I love you, stuff like that. Twitter just says, hey, these strings, they can't be passwords. We're disallowing that. Now you have a programmatic way to ban the most commonly breached passwords. And we have the empirical evidence. We have the data to back up those statements. It's not somebody at Twitter saying, monkey seems like a really common password. We should probably block that one. We can now say that if you choose the password monkey, it has been breached 932,064 times. You are not allowed to use the word monkey as a password. It's data backed. It's mostly anonymous. It's free. It's even open source. So if you wanted this data file for yourself, it's about 9 gigs, 8 to 9 gigs, something like that. It's like 8.8. You can download this file and you can do this exact same thing on your own hardware for your own services without interfacing with the API at all. Troy just wants the greater good to take place here. And he's giving developers all the tools they need to make it happen. I am super pumped about this.
Look, I think it's great. I've been using a password manager, and as I've been asked to change my passwords, I've been putting a super strong generated password. And it's still hard to get all these uniques, but I love it when I get a data breach. Your password may have been compromised, and it's a unique password. And I go, okay, 1 button click. Don't have to worry about changing my Facebook password or whatever it is. I will tell you, Microsoft Live, you are on my bad list because I guessed the password on Windows 10. I knew the password. I put it in and it said no. So I had to do the crazy password reset. And then it was for my mother. So I needed to have that old password back. And it said, you can't do it because you've already used it. And it's like, no, I needed it and it was right. And you told me it was wrong. Now, how do I explain to my mother that she has to add the next number to it because you won't let us use it? So I'm not happy about it.
I really like, and I've tried to set this up before, but I understand the frustration. I've tried to set up password managers for older relatives, and it is frustrating. It's super frustrating. The only way I was able to do it for one of my family members was letting LastPass stay logged in on her Chromebook.
Yep. Which is fine. The problem is that when you get to sites like Bank of America, where we won't allow you to autofill this.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, my super strong password now is, and that's literally, I mean, any security person should absolutely see that. Somebody goes, oh, I can't do this. Now I have to copy all these crazy characters. I'm going to change it to something less secure. And that should be a huge red flag.
If you aren't allowing, or if a site is not allowing pasting of a password or autofilling of a password for security, that site has, or the site owner has no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what true security is, and they have no idea how users actually behave. You know what happens to my passwords that I can't paste? They become regular old standard passwords. They're not these crazy 32-character monstrosities that I have everywhere else where I can copy and paste. They become 8-character things that I manually have to type.
Correct horse battery staple. But
Yeah,
that doesn't fit the mold because it doesn't have a number in it, and it doesn't have the right
exactly.
special character. And
I have fought this battle endlessly in every company I've ever worked at. It's, make the minimum like 16 and just go wild with the composition. Why care at that point?
so anyway, we're surprisingly out of time. That was really fast for us. Anyway, so we spoke about that. We spoke about passwords. This API is awesome. And again, stop what you're doing. Go reboot your router. Go to your neighbor's house. Reboot your router. Tell the Twitters. Tell everyone. Do an Instagram video of you rebooting your router. Just do it and get as many people as you can to do it.
One more number. The word password has been found in breaches 3,303,003 times, according to the Pwned Passwords API.
Okay.
So you probably shouldn't use the word password as your password.
So, and again, we will see you next week, and have a good night.
See everyone.
Bye. And